Oh, awesome. Cool. Thanks, everybody. All right. I'll see you.
Thanks, Jack.
Yep, no worries. Bye.
Joe, can you make Jake and I co-host so we can mute people as needed?
I suppose so,
Thank you.
if you really want that burden.
It's really more of a pleasure. No, I'm just kidding.
Joe and I made an agreement last night to mute each other if we got too snarky or cranky or too whatever at the end of, as we approach the end of the week. So. Hi, Curtis. Hi, Jose.
Hi, Jose.
Hello, everyone.
Jose, last time I saw you, I thought you were growing a beard. Like, finally, that was just yesterday, actually.
Yeah, it was. Well, I knew who I was going to be on the Zoom with, and Curtis. I just can't bother, so I gave up. I gave up.
One of us. One of us.
It is intimidating to understand how no matter what you do facial hair wise, you are going to come in a distant second to Curtis. So
For sure.
That's where I've been shaving too.
there you go. Great. I saw Casey in the background for like 2 seconds. I couldn't tell the state of his state. But,
Yeah, it's winter. He usually will shave it if he wants one last snowstorm.
Hi,
Hi,
hey,
Carrie.
Charlotte. Hey, Carrie.
Hi, Charlotte. So we're waiting for Ursula. I know Julia is going to be late.
Ursula was traveling in May. She did the finance subcommittee meeting and then was going to travel a bit. And so
She may just be a few minutes late.
she may just, yeah, thank you, Carrie.
Okay. Are you waiting for anybody else, Jake?
I suggested to the principals and the student services team, I know the week that everybody's had this week, and I suggested that we didn't have anything too pressing for them, and this would be a good evening to not be at work for one evening this week. So
Okay, well, if everyone's amenable, we can get started. Okay, I would like to call the Mount Greylock Regional School District School Committee to order. It is Thursday, February 9th, 2023. It is 6:01 p.m. We are meeting remotely via Zoom. If I could call the roll, Jose.
Here.
Carrie.
Here.
Ursula. Not here. Steve.
Here.
And Julia is not here. And Christina is here. Okay. Curtis, did I call you? No, I'm sorry.
But I'm here nonetheless.
It's my bad for going out of order. I get mixed up when people aren't here. At Mount Greylock Regional School District, our mission is to create a community of learners working together in a safe and challenging learning environment that encourages restorative-based processes, respect, inclusive diversity, courtesy, integrity, and responsibility through high expectations and cooperation, resulting in lifelong learning and personal growth. The first item on our agenda is public comment. No one is signed up, and I don't see anyone here to give public comment. So I think we can move on to the next item, which is the student spotlight. So I will turn it over to Charlotte.
Hi there. Just for the updates, Mount Greylock High School students recently had their rounds of midterms, and many are looking forward to the nearing February break in just around 2 weeks. This past weekend, we had the snowball dance, which was organized by the senior representatives and other senior class volunteers. And there was a DJ and a pretty good turnout. In student council, there have been two primarily active subcommittees, one being the feminine hygiene products and the Greylock talks. In the hygiene committee, we've still been working on finding a solidified solution. There's been talking about going to different directed studies or reaching out to some Williams students. They have a club similar to what we're looking to do, but nothing set in stone yet. And for Greylock Talks, they have brought in a new advisor, Kotzi White, and they're very optimistic about bringing in a speaker for each of the school months left. Currently, the plan is to have the speakers most likely be related to a couple topical issues in the world, but definitely will take into consideration input from the student body. In winter sports, there aren't many updates, but it has been a successful past couple of weeks and months. And the Western Mass tournaments will be starting in a couple of weeks. I know that was a pretty quick update, but that is all I have for tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Okay, next up on the agenda is approval of minutes. I would like to make a motion to approve the January 12th, 2023 minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Curtis seconds. Any discussion? Carrie.
I think I had a correction. In number 13, MASC updates, in her new role as, it should say not president, but chair of Division 6.
Okay.
I thought there was another one, but I don't see it, so I'm good.
Yeah, the rest one, it was really, really minor. And I, of course, can't find it right now. It was during principal updates.
Actually, while you're looking for that, I also had a suggestion for number 10, the superintendent report. It says currently Jay McCandless has provided an update to share that the district has an applicant. I'm not sure what that was supposed to say, maybe an applicant pool, but probably not just an applicant.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was an applicant pool.
Okay.
Oh, number 5, where it says principal he shares the budget does not implicate any major personal additions at this time. Is that supposed to be indicate? Okay.
Anticipate, maybe?
Maybe anticipate. Implicate just seems weird there.
Yeah.
Very minor, but it just seemed odd.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other corrections? Hi, Ursula. Okay, all in favor? Conry, aye.
Constantine, I.
Elfenbein, aye.
Green eye.
Malloy, aye.
Miller, aye.
Okay, thank you. That motion passes. Next up, we have director reports. And this month we have the director of academic technology. So I turn it over to Ellie.
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's been a little while since I've talked at a school committee meeting, so it's nice to see you all. All right, I'll get started. Let me just share my screen. All right. Move you all out of the way. Okay, so I am here tonight to talk about academic technology priorities for this coming school year. And before I do that, I want to talk about a couple successes in the past year or so. We have adopted one-to-one iPads in kindergarten and first grade at the 2 elementary schools. We have adopted ClassLink. I'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. And our software adoption and usage has gotten narrower, but used more. So instead of using a lot of tools, we have really focused on the tools that our students need to use for their curricular learning. So here are some photos of kindergarten and first grade students working on the iPads that are new to them this year. We moved pretty quickly to one-to-one Chromebooks during remote learning. And after that kind of period of time, we talked as a tech group, which consists of amazing individuals. Julianne Haskins, the media specialist at Lanesboro, Rebecca Leonard, the technology inclusion teacher at Williamstown Elementary, Liza Barrett, who is the library media specialist at Mount Greylock, Cody Scolforo, who's the audio and visual specialist at the high school, at Rob Winook, the director of operations, and then Cindy Sheehy, the principal at Williamstown, and Nolan Pratt at Lanesboro Elementary, and made the decision to move to iPads for kindergarten and first graders because, you know, they don't all know their letters when they come into kindergarten, and giving them iPads in the classroom allows them to interact with content at their appropriate level. They can drag and drop icons, they can sort categories, they can interact with letters and tap on them and make sounds. And you can see some students are using headphones, some students are working with adults, some students might work in small groups or one-to-one. So they've allowed a lot of versatility in the classroom. We have adopted ClassLink, which is a kind of a software bookmarking tool in a way. When students open their Chromebooks, they will see this home screen with all of the tools. This is not a Mount Greylock specific student, but they see all the tools they have access to. And ClassLink works on Chromebooks, PCs, MacBooks, iPads, pretty much whatever tool a student might use. And it allows higher accessibility to the software because students don't have to enter usernames or passwords for what they're logging into. So it takes the executive functioning load off of the students so they can just seamlessly access whatever they're going to use. We have seen it is been used more at the elementary schools because at the high school, a lot of online content is embedded into Canvas. However, there are a good number of students accessing ClassLink at the high school for a variety of reasons. And ClassLink can be customized by grade level, class, or student. So for example, if I were a student in 3rd grade and I needed a specific software to support my learning, the Launchpad would be customized to me. So every student has exactly what they need right in front of them. ClassLink allows us to run analytics on software that students are using. We can kind of slice and dice it however we want it. But in this visual, you'll see in that big circle is our core curricular content for the elementary schools and a little bit in the middle high school. Those are the softwares that are being used the most. So McGraw-Hill runs our elementary math curriculum, the high school social studies, science, and math curriculums. Wit and Wisdom is our ELA curriculum at the elementaries. Mystery Science runs our elementary and middle school, and Discovery Ed runs throughout the curricular areas K to 12. Second Step is our social emotional learning. So it's really nice to see that the tools that are being used the most run the gamut of our core curricular areas. On the outside, you'll see the tools that are being used kind of in that second tier. And some of those are tools, some of them are intervention materials. So Codable and Typing Club that allows students to access early coding programs for computers and typing skills. Explore Learning is a math intervention tool, as well as Lexia Core 5, that's an ELA intervention tool. IXL is a dual math, ELA and ELL intervention tool. And Brain Pop supplements kind of those core curricular areas if a teacher needs another way to build background knowledge for students. And that last bubble, Canvas, is our high school tool during the grades 7 through 12. That's a tool that's being used. Google products, Drive, Suite, and Earth are accessed by students pretty frequently. And Canva is something new this year. That's a digital design product that can be accessed through ClassLink. It's kind of a step down from Adobe. So students 2nd grade through 12th grade can access Canva and have made some really amazing interactive materials. So now thinking ahead, we want to continue leveraging digital experiences for enrichment opportunities to build background knowledge for our students. We want to continue sharing across all 3 schools with learning and collaboration. We would like to get some more feedback from teaching staff about their needs and scaffold their supports for them so they can leverage the appropriate tools for their academic level and content area, which may vary year to year depending on the students that they're teaching. We need to think about refreshing devices as they age. And I'll break that down by school. So upcoming at Lanesboro Elementary, we have some minor software increases to reflect enrollment. We would like to install 5 new short throw projectors, as well as replace some miscellaneous hardware items. Some longer term projects that we're thinking about are replacing projectors as they age out, but a little sooner would be some Chromebook refreshes in the next budget cycle, because our Chromebooks are only licensed for a period of time and then they no longer support updates. So they need to be refreshed every couple of years. At Williamstown Elementary, we also have some minor software license increases to reflect enrollment. Because of enrollment, we need to purchase a few more Chromebooks or iPads, depending on that projected enrollment, as well as replacing some miscellaneous items that, change and break over time. And the front office really could use some new desktop upgrades. The desktops at Williamstown have been there for a really long time, and I think we're hand-me-downs. So we could use to replace those. Some long-term projects would be displays in our pre-K classrooms to allow building background knowledge for those students, upgrading the auditorium projector, and then replacing displays in the classrooms as they age. Looking at Mount Greylock, these are both some upcoming and long-term projects, and we're trying to make the best decision possible for how to tackle these bigger projects. For next year, we need additional Chromebooks to reflect the projected enrollment. We need to update the digital learning lab desktop computers and softwares, as well as replace the faculty devices. They have devices that predate the building by some years, so they're about ready to get replaced, and we're exploring different options as to what makes most sense for our teachers. And then the office desktops there also need to be replaced. So prioritizing what is most important at the high school is going to be something we need to continue to talk about. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have a quick question for Joe. Is all of this considered budget increase, or is some of this already built into the budget that you're expecting?
Going into FY23, with the focus on staff that we had, we did not have a Chromebook or laptop replacement line in place. During the budget approval, we talked about how we would use grant funding mid-year if that felt felt practical and pragmatic. Practical and pragmatic are the same thing, aren't they? And so I think that's a conversation that over the next few weeks, those larger lines that you saw, especially at Mount Greylock, related to renewal of laptops for staff that really are aging, that is an area where grant funding is perfectly suited. Unlike staffing, where commitments to staffing hopefully are perpetual. And so this is an area where I think we're going to have some deeper conversations now that we've had this initial conversation. We're going to get into, here's what we can do with grants. Hopefully actually getting those orders in sooner than later. And that grant funding is under our discretionary use mid-year right now. So if the school committee says, yes, let's go ahead and get those laptops ordered so that they can get in this summer in plenty of time to be ready for use in the fall. Perfect use of grant funding that we have available. The rest of it, I think some of those renewals, some of the increases that we see within software, those are areas where we're going to need to budget for those incremental bits, because those are going to be annual going forward. And so we can't think of them as one time or once every 5, 6, 7 year type investments. So that's where we stand at the moment.
Joe, I'm sorry, thank you for that. Could you specify which grants we're talking about for grant funding for the larger expenses?
Yep, we'd probably be talking about the remainder of the ESSER funds that we have. So ARPA funds that we still have trailing as we move towards their expiration at the middle and end of FY24. I should repeat though, just because I think it's going to be over the next 2 months, we're going to have a lot of these discussions. Those areas of federal funding related to recovery, related to COVID, those truly are drying up. And so as we talk about things that we can do right now to squeeze the last little bit out of those, but then with a focus on staffing and the kinds of requests and the kinds of abilities that we want to be able to have over the next few years, those are the ones where we're going to need to figure out primarily appropriated funding. Use of our revolvers to gradually get those into the appropriated, to not have 1 year big bumps in appropriated. That's where that math will take hold. So I want to make sure we're all training ourselves and constraining ourselves within some of those boxes, which is, I think, the only way we can prudently get through the next 3, 4, 5 years with potential cost increases and funding drying up from a variety of sources.
Jose, did you have a question?
So yes, thank you, Christina, and thank you, Ellie, for your presentation. I was just curious about that and the thoughtfulness with regards to every aspect that you presented us was really apparent. Particularly with regarding the iPads for the kindergarten and first grade students. One of the things I was curious about is, as a district, thinking, stepping back and thinking about digital literacy, digital well-being, are these things that we would like to assess in terms of our student body across, from pre-K all the way up through 12th grade? And is that, would that and has that kind of assessment helped inform some of the practices that you're laying out and that you're planning for the district?
Has it been assessed? I wouldn't say with a specific tool at the moment, right? We are able to, as far as digital well-being and then digital learning, as far as online and curriculum, they are very, very similar, but implemented in different ways, right? So digital well-being, I think that is a conversation that happens somewhat regularly, more at the high school we see, where we have different layers in place to support students as things kind of bubble up to the surface. So we have a securely monitoring system. We also have a gaggle monitoring system. They monitor different things, what students are doing. And if there's a concern that comes up, we definitely take action rather quickly with the student support team. But as far as the teaching, digital well-being, I think that's something that is always evolving because the target moves very quickly. With our middle and high school students in particular. With our younger students, I know that messaging about using tools in respectful, appropriate ways happens all the time. Rebecca and Julianne are really, really purposeful about making sure that that is relayed. And also making sure that we're using our tools in ways that are for explicit learning and individualized for the students that are in front of us, and not just, I'm going to open this and put you on a program. Everything that we're using really has a teacher-driven piece. It has that explicit teaching, and then the curriculums that are online are really for that further learning, to build background knowledge, to give them further engagement, to be able to scaffold if we need to. And then the teachers can generate reports on how students are doing. So I think that my answer kind of runs the gamut a little bit, but yes, we are thinking about that all the time, every day.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Ellie? Thank you so much, Ellie.
Of course, thank you.
Next up on the agenda is the Field and Track Project Committee. Carrie, are you gonna take that up?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really the moment where we tell you that the construction bid documents are not quite ready for your approval. We had expected to have them for you this month, but they did come to us. They got a very thorough review by Joe and by Rob Winook and by some other folks. And there were some updates that still needed to be made so that clarity was prioritized in terms of the electrical and some of the what would you call it, drainage and irrigation, right? So we want to make sure this time around that the bid documents are specific and clear, and that everyone is bidding on the same thing. So those are the some of those concerns came up. So we're just going to wait until next month to get the bid documents to you, so that you can approve them and we can kind of put them on hold until we're ready to pull them out again. They will go to the track and field committee before they come to the school committee for another review. And we canceled that meeting because the documents, again, they just weren't quite where we needed them to be.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah.
Any questions for Carrie? All right, moving on to the Field and Track Project fundraising group and structure discussion. I think we were hoping Julia would be here for this discussion, so I don't know.
Yeah, if we could wait for Julia, unless Joe, do you want to start something there?
If the committee is okay with it, I think perhaps holding this item until Julie is able to join, and
yeah,
that'd be great.
Would it make sense to just drop down to finance? Or could Julia's needed for policy and governance as well?
The policy and governance agenda items will be short and sweet. I don't think we will always miss Julia, but we don't necessarily need her for our agenda.
So if that, Christina, does that work for you? Do we need consensus of the committee to change the agenda around?
Everybody okay with a little tweak?
Absolutely.
Okay. Go for it, Jose.
Okay, so I was I thought we were gonna go finance. Oh, I've got to clear my voice and make sure I'm thinking straight. Yeah, the Policy and Governance Subcommittee has not had a chance to meet since our last full committee meeting. And so the two agenda items that are scheduled for a vote are actually not ready to be voted on. The Policy and Governance Subcommittee at the moment is scheduled to meet on March 1st. It'll give us an opportunity to have a bit more discussion about these particular policies and then make a decision to move them forward to the full committee for voting and consideration. Policy KCD is listed as an information item. This is a policy that the subcommittee will be discussing on Monday. So if you if you have a moment to, it's in the meeting packet. If you have a moment to review that policy, have any initial feedback or brief feedback to give us, we definitely welcome it. But that's it on the weather report. Oh, Stephen, I don't know if that's a question to me or to someone else.
It is to you. You had asked about quick feedback.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So looking at, I'm just talking to the different windows on BDE 0.5, point 4, the subcommittee may make recommendations for committee action, but it may not act for the school committee. Do we want to add something saying unless authorized by the committee?
Yeah, Stephen, if I could, only because it's not listed as, well, it should not, I'm not sure how best to phrase this. It shouldn't be on our agenda item yet, our agenda in the agenda as something for us to discuss or vote, but we certainly welcome feedback. So I might ask Stephen, if you wouldn't mind just emailing me with that feedback or that question that we can then consider at our upcoming subcommittee meeting on March 1st. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Carrie, you had your hand up, and then did you want to say something?
Well, I had some feedback on another policy, but I'll email you.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. Thank you. I think that's it from our desk, Christina.
Okay, great, thank you, Jose, that was sweet. So are we going to the superintendent report? Are we going back up to finance? Are we doing superintendent report?
Can we just continue with the agenda and we'll go
Perfect.
back to finance and the other thing when Julia gets here? Is that okay?
Great.
Or
Yep, that's great.
Joe, do you have any sense of when Julia is going to arrive?
Julia had said she might be about a half hour late, so right around now. But if we can continue with the superintendent report, that would probably ensure her arrival.
Very happy to continue with the superintendent report. Before I get into the formal report, I had the privilege of getting to watch the Mount Greylock Regional School one round of the 8th grade debate today. And it was just impressive and wonderful. And I understand a long held tradition. And there were parents in the room and other teachers, and I can't wait to go back tomorrow. And then there's a couple of good issues on the docket for Monday. So thank you to that group of teachers, and thank you to those young folks who have made themselves incredibly well informed on some very important topical issues of the day. Just a brief update on the DEI&B director hiring process. We have tentative dates of doing first round interviews on February 7th and March 1st. We have the interview team almost complete. We're still trying to fill in a couple of gaps, but that is subject to maybe being pushed back a week, but we have it on the calendar and we have folks, we'll have folks ready to go, and we're very excited to finally be moving that forward.
What dates did you say?
I'm I'm going to turn around and look at my calendar, February 27th, which is the Monday after break, and then March 1st, which is the Wednesday of that same week, Gary. And so that's a conversation for Jose and I, because we have a policy and governance subcommittee on the books for March 1st. But we can talk early next week, Jose, about that. School calendar, we're not quite ready to bring a full school calendar to you. I just wanted to hit on a couple of highlights. It looks to me like we are, the earliest date at which we can ask our teachers and staff to come back is August 28th. Per the contract, it looks like that is actually perfect for this year, because Monday the 28th is the beginning of that last week of August. So we are looking tentatively at teachers coming back on Monday the 28th. Our students in first grade through grade 12 joining us on Wednesday, August 30. And our kindergarten and pre-K students joining us on Tuesday, September 5th. That's the day after Labor Day. We are going to continue using half days to supplement professional development. And with where we stand now, there's still some work to be done by the administrative team to look at this, and then we'll have 5 or 6 different people counting out to make sure that our visions of 180 all match one another. We could tentatively, with no snow days, no having to close school because a water line broke or anything like that, we could tentatively have Wednesday, June 12 as our final day of school. We do have an allowance for 5 school days that would get us into the next week. And actually, in a worst case scenario where we had over 5 snow days, weather days, or other types of emergency days, we actually, by contract, do need to wrap school up by June 30. But even with 5 snow days, we still have a full week and 1 day to make use of in June before we are needing to look at violating the contract. So more on the calendar next month. Briefly, I do want to let you know about a really nice program that the commissioner rolled out. Commissioner Riley rolled out at a meeting that I happened to be in attendance at a couple of weeks ago. It's a new Student Achievement Awards program that is geared at a very, very specific group of students. If you would like to know more about some of the research and the rationale behind this, I'm happy to provide it. But these are certificates of achievement that are going to be presented by school principals to students who have scored and exceed expectations on the MCAS, or progressing on the MCAS, or the MCAS alternate exam, which is an examination for students who have nuances in their life and in their academic life that would make just taking the regular old MCAS really inappropriate. So these are students who have scored exceeds expectations or progressing, who also happen to fall into the reporting category of high needs. This is special recognition for students that in the state's eyes, and I think I would say in all of our eyes, are working through additional challenges to master the MCAS material. You've heard it said in these meetings probably 50 or 60 times, and so you all know this, but for the sake of folks watching at home, that high needs designation can mean several things in the Commonwealth. It can mean a student that is economically disadvantaged or low income. It can mean a student who is working to learn the English language and to learn in English, even as they are adjusting to a new culture and a new climate and a whole new group of people living in a new place. Their first language is not necessarily English. Or it is just I'm drawing a blank because I'm tired and it's been a long day. On the third reporting category, Julia, maybe you can help me out. The third, or Curtis, the third reporting category for high needs. ELL students.
The students with disabilities.
Thank you, Carrie. So thank you. I appreciate that's why it's nice to be on a team. So these are students that are overcoming very specific challenges in order to achieve at the highest levels. And I'm very grateful to Commissioner Riley for taking this on and highlighting this and making it a priority of his. I think this is very reflective of his tenure as commissioner. And I think in all honesty, it's reflective of his life as a single father and his work as a teacher and as a principal and as a superintendent and now as the commissioner of education. And so we look forward to receiving these awards in the mail, and they look like this. This is a sample. And our principals are working on ways that will appropriately and sensitively mark this achievement for many of our students. And finally, tonight, I do just want to touch base. We are moving forward. You'll remember from the district improvement plan that we really wanted to identify a way to reach out to students, reach out to families, and reach out to staff in order to gather their voice, like we did through Courtney Tunis's Greylock Listening and Learning Project. So we have entered into a contract with Panorama Survey that does this work around the Commonwealth, does this work around the country. And I'm not sure Ellie is still on, but Ellie has been heading this up for us. And we will be rolling out more information to our families here over the next few weeks and actually doing our first round of surveys as we get into the late winter and early spring. Tomorrow, we're using this as an opportunity to bring together sort of our mental health support staff and team from all three schools. Will be gathering tomorrow to look through. We have identified the big broad areas that we want to start off asking questions about. Our guidance counselors and our adjustment counselors and our school social workers will be gathering tomorrow morning to start looking through the vast question bank to identify the specific questions that will comprise the survey. And we're very excited about that. It's a great opportunity to get those folks together from all three schools. And we try to take advantage of those opportunities every time we can. And grateful to them, grateful to Ellie, and grateful to you for supporting this piece of our district improvement plan. And that is all I have by way of a superintendent report tonight.
Thank you, Jake.
You're welcome.
Jake, before we move back on the agenda. Okay. Julia, welcome. So moving backwards, we're going to go back to the field and track project fundraising group and structure discussion. And I am turning that over to Julia Bowen.
Thank you. And apologies for being late. For the note taker, I think I arrived at 6:32. So what I'm going to do is give you an update on our conversations around funding for this project since we last met as a school committee, and then share some of the thoughts about how we move forward, and then pass it off to Joe to provide some of the greater detail around the numbers. So Carrie and I have been working with Jake and Joe to understand what the strategy should be for fundraising for the field and track per our discussion at our January meeting. As a reminder, we believe we are currently roughly 1.625 million short of what we need. That includes the estimated project cost of 4.125 million, a promise to keep $1 million in reserves, and a most recent valuation of the remainder of the Williams gift of 3.5 million. So fundamentally, there are a number of ways we can raise funds, and we've talked about them all. State grants and allocations, federal grants and earmarks, local grants, and then private grants and donors, including local corporations. So over the last month, we've had a number of conversations and have spent time assessing the viability of each of these methods and have determined that it is unlikely that we can raise 1.6 million through these avenues, especially by October or even by next January. So just a little bit of the reasoning for that. State funding of consequence seemed unlikely based on the sources that we talked to with knowledge of the State House and Senate opportunities. Federal grants take a long time to secure, even if they're possible. Our local government officials have expressed concern about property taxes and the town's borrowing in the present and future. And private grants and donors at that scale seem unlikely. We do not know of that level of funder or group of funders who'd be interested in a project like ours to the tune of 1.6 million. But if anybody listening does, we encourage them to reach out to Joe. We've talked about GoFundMe campaigns, alumni campaigns, corporate campaigns, any other community campaigns that can defray the costs. And we still may need to do some of that, but we believe that that will not yield the full amount. And so we need a plan to make sure that we're fully there. With just as a side note, the message we kept hearing is that is not how people expect public schools to be funded. They expect them to be funded with public funds. So that's just, at that scale. So we kind of laid out what we thought our 4 options were. I'm going to go through each of those options and kind of give you our analysis on that option or our thoughts on that option, with the last one being the one that we would like to propose to do going forward. So option 1 is put the project on hold. As the economy improves, we would anticipate that our Williams gift will grow faster than inflation, and we'll be able to fund the full project from that gift. That would take years. We don't know how many. We do know that this project has already been years in the making, and our efforts to be responsible stewards of our finances, the environment, our students' health and safety have put us in this position. And so putting the project on hold right now feels like an absolute last resort. We could raise as much money as we can through those methods I described and use our reserves for the rest. But that we know that our towns are experiencing escalating costs without concurrent rise in their taxes. So we fear if we use our reserves now for the track and field, we will soon be having conversations about cuts to the academic program as we don't have funds moving forward. We could pare down the project, but we know we've had enough meetings over enough years to believe that this is the project we need. And so that doesn't feel right either. So the final option is one that was briefly discussed before, but we would like to move forward with, and that is that we go back to our towns and ask to I said include an additional 1.8 million for the track and field, because when we go out to finish the bonding for the school project, though I think this would actually be a separate bond, and that's news from Joe today. So just a couple more details about that. Why 1.8 million? As we heard from John Benzinger, that SCANSA's nationwide team forecasts a 5 to 6% increase in construction costs for the upcoming year. If the current project cost is 4.125, it will be 4.3725 in a year, which is the timeline we'll be on. And so that's an additional 250,000. I know Steve did that math for us in our last meeting as well. We would ask for some of that project escalation to be built into the bond, and the remainder that isn't built into the bond, it would be a small enough number that we believe we could fundraise through by identifying FF&E costs that could be supported by corporations or individuals, but a much smaller number, like $75,000. Joe's working on getting some numbers about what the impact might be on communities, but roughly we think it's around, in Williamstown, something like 8 cents.
Julia, Joe has those.
Oh, good.
He shared them
Okay.
in finance. So
Okay. Excellent. So we have a motion should I read the motion so that we can discuss it, or do we want to hear more from Joe before we? Why don't I read it?
Joe, do you want to give the breakdown of what you shared in finance?
Sure. So we're talking about $1.8 million that is going to our member towns and putting it to a vote of the residents of those towns to authorize up to $1.8 million in borrowing. If we were to borrow $1.8 million, we reached out to Unibank, our bond counsel that we've worked with throughout the school building project today for an estimate of what that might look like. For a field and track type complex, the Massachusetts laws state that your maximum term is 15 years. So we'd be looking at borrowing $1.8 million and paying it back plus interest over the course of 15 years. When you look at that and you get a projection from them, as we did for consistent payments over the course of those 15 years, so that we're not seeing a lot of peaks and valleys or declining over time with a really high mountaintop to start with, going down to zero as you go to the end. What we'd be looking at would be about $165,000 per year for 15 years. That $165,000 based on our regional agreement and how capital cost sharing works between our two towns, it would mean that if it was fiscal year 23, based on the formula that exists, we'd be looking at about $51,000 per year from Lanesboro and $114,000 per year from Williamstown. So to put it another way, if we were to put this to a vote of our two-member towns, which within our funding group feels, I know that we've said that our towns are under property tax burdens and are under their own pressures. But to try to fund this out of our reserves and then say, we took this decision out of your hands and now we're in a pickle too, because we don't have money to help with sustaining operations and education, felt like a roundabout way to not handle this situation in a positive manner. Whereas actually taking this to our two towns and saying, if Lanesboro is willing to pay about $51,000 per year, Williamstown is willing to pay about $114,000 a year for the next 15 years, then for the next, hopefully many decades, our community will have a field and track facility that our community can use and be proud of. So what we're putting forward to you tonight is the suggestion that that is the vote that you might take to move us down that path, to start to have the conversations, to figure out all of the details that would need to happen in order for us to try to get this to a town vote, to towns votes in the near term here within the town meetings here in May and June of this year. I'll actually add one more thing within this monologue, which is if that borrowing is authorized, if we push forward, and then if the borrowing is authorized, the plan would be put it out to bid in the fall, select a contractor in the early winter, and then actually utilize that authorization to borrow, coupled with whatever we know about the gift and what we know about our ability to fundraise, and then borrow the remaining gap between the contracted amount and what we were able to do prior to that. Do that borrowing in May of 2024, which would then put us in a good place to have that cash on hand for moving through construction during the summer and early fall. I think I covered everything that we.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Julia, well, Christine, is it okay if Julia makes a motion and then we discuss more, or do you want to have discussion before a motion is made?
Well, let's get the motion out there.
Okay.
So the motion is to move forward with an effort to request from our member towns the authorization to borrow up to 1.8 million in order to complete the field and track project. This effort will include meeting with our member towns' administration and committees, as well as taking any steps necessary to facilitate a vote by each town at the town's annual town meetings.
Miller, second.
Great. Thank you, Steve, Julia, and Joe for all of that. This has been a process, right? So before questions, I'm just going to say we've all spent quite a bit of time, and I want to thank Julia in particular for her leadership in moving us forward to being able to bring you a strategy that actually is realistic. Okay. We know we want to get this done, and we want to create a strategy that can actually accomplish our goals. So this is a question of we would still need to build public support, right, in both towns. We would need to get people who support recreation and athletics and leadership building in, you know, in youth sports out to town meetings to vote. It's like passing a building project or passing a budget. This will actually, if we approve this and the towns put it on their warrant articles, it will be part of the Mount Greylock capital budget. So it'll be part of our budget that we present to the towns for the next 15 years, and then it will go away because it will have gotten paid off. So passing it at town meeting this spring, town meetings this spring will be absolutely critical. But then it's also a matter of, you know, making sure that our budgets pass every year. And that's our job as school committee members, to advocate for our budgets. So yes, let's open it up for questions. Jose?
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Julia and Joe, for all this. I found it to be incredibly helpful and informative. Two questions. The first one is the Field and Track Project fundraising group. Is that group then dissolving as of this moment moving forward, or we expecting this group to maybe adopt some responsibilities in terms of advocating for this motion to our member towns? That's the first question. The second one, and I hesitate to ask it, but I think it's important, it's certainly to me, to hear other folks' response. You know, what if one or both member towns reject this motion or this request to borrow these funds? What's the status of the Field and Track project then?
So I'll start. So Jose, at the last school committee meeting, we voted to establish a committee, a funding committee. That hasn't been done, and I want to make that clear. So this group that has been getting together has been a brainstorming group, kind of like, let's put together a strategy so that we can start a group. But now the strategy looks very different from what it did when we began our conversations. This, I think, could still remain a brainstorming group, but we would need to figure out next steps, right? We have not done that. We have not figured out what needs to be done if we are to go this direction. So we might need to get back to you on what that could and should look like. And then the second, if it fails to pass in either town, it fails, because you have to have the support of both towns in order for a budget to pass. It is a risk, right?
And sorry, Carrie, I just want to maybe rephrase rephrase or repeat my question. What then would be the status of the Field and Track project? Is there a plan B that is the default?
So it's not just the Field and Track project, it's the budget, right? We really need to make that clear, that this would be presented as part of the Mount Greylock. Well, let me see. So, Joe, that's actually a really good question, because until it passes the bonds, we don't actually have the debt in the budget. Okay, so going back, it would be in the budget, not this year, but next year. Not for FY24, I think, but I'm going to let Joe figure that out. in terms of what happens with the track and field project, if the request to borrow doesn't pass, then we have to either request a special town meeting in whichever town it didn't pass and try to get the vote change, like try to get a positive vote, or find another way to fund this.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to double check myself before I just said it, but if we borrow in May of 2024, as we talked about, the first payment would be due in November of 2024, which would put us into the FY25 budget as it relates to this. So our budget for FY24 is independent of this, but at town meeting, at this year's town meeting, what would happen is our budget would be there as an item standing alone by itself, hopefully passing, and then separate from that would be an authorization or a request to be authorized to borrow up to 1.8 million. So we would have separation of the issues there. Starting in FY25, then the capital line that currently is only the building project borrowing would then be bumped up by the amount that was borrowed and needs to get paid off annually for 15 years.
Thank you, Joe. Ursula?
Yes, I thought Julia started to mention this, so I'm curious if you know. If you don't, that's okay at this point. Do you have any idea what the impact to taxpayers would be for the 50, approximately 50,000 in Lanesboro and 100 and something thousand in Williamstown? Do we know what that looks like? 8 cents on the tax rate, or I thought you said something like that, Julia, but I didn't know if anyone has that info yet.
So yesterday we were trying to estimate what those would be.
Approximately, yeah, just
all the information I could glean was what the fire station in Williamstown is asking to borrow and what they say the impact is on the tax rate.
Okay.
That's not the same, I don't believe, for what it would be in Lanesboro. Because I think that calculation would be different. But I don't know, but it would be we believe it would be pennies on the dollar rather than,
dollars. Yeah.
Or even than dimes. So we think, but we need to get that information.
That would be a really nice piece of information probably to have as far as the magnitude of the ask.
And I'll just say another really nice piece of information that we do have is that the CPC, which is the Community Preservation Committee, authorized $100,000 to Mount Greylock for this project in response to the application that we submitted. Jake worked a lot on that application. Joe showed up big time at 2 meetings. Jake was also at those meetings and responded to some really hard questions, and they did vote to support this project. So that's a really good sign of some community support that's already starting to show. So thank you both, Joe and Jake, for your work on that. Steve and then Christina.
Yeah, just if we're trying to put things in perspective, this is the cup of coffee calculation, and someone can tell me if I'm doing this wrong. If you assume, say, $50,000 for Lanesboro, if you assume 1,000 taxpayers, this would be $50 per taxpayer. That's basically $1 a week. That might just be a nice way to view the number.
Christina. Thanks, Steve.
So I think you are preparing for this piece of my question, or the group is the fundraising little ad hoc consultants that are doing all this hard work. But I guess what would be really valuable is the sort of the elevator pitch for the project. As we're out in the community talking to the people that are going to be voting in this town. What's our pitch? I think it's easy for all of us to talk about the how great this project will be for the kids and for the community, but it would be nice to have something very concise that we can get out there, whether it's, you know, little snippets in the press, community talks. I don't know what that would look like, but I'm just interested in what those ideas are.
Yeah, absolutely. We had started working on those pieces. Joe has bullet points that he's put together for a narrative. Julia has already identified members of the community who could potentially help with writing things up and doing graphics. We had like brainstormed a website and lots of other things. So it's like a lot of that is already in motion, and we just need to get the strategy approved before we know what needs to be produced, right? So I think we're ready, and we'll bring other folks in. I don't think this needs to be a school committee subcommittee doing this work. I think because we'll want to pull on the talents of members of our communities, right? And meet when we can meet. We'll still want to meet with donors, and that doesn't feel like it's appropriate for an open meeting law bound committee. We're not making any decisions. This committee would still be making all the decisions. We would be a brainstorming group. We might need to still start a 501c3 for this, because if we want to produce materials, those have to be paid for by another entity. And in order for us to receive gifts toward this project, with anything like a GoFundMe or a Venmo or anything like that, we need to have a receiving entity, which is not the school. We had started looking into creating an umbrella 501c3 that could encompass all of our, Joe, is it okay if I say this? All of our booster groups, all of our entities that currently raise money, but they're not nonprofits right now. They're just like run by parents who, not just, they're run by parents who are doing this kind of without much support from the school. So if there's a foundation or some sort of an umbrella entity that can also hold the funds for all of these other groups, that would really do a service to the district and to the parents who are taking the lead for a lot of these booster, these teen groups and other entities at the school in the arts as well. So does that answer your question? Okay. Jose.
Thanks, Carrie. I think I'll just start by saying there's some concern about impacts on working class families for borrowing this money. We have an upcoming, within a few weeks, vote on a new fire station in Williamstown that is going to be an additional burden, certainly on working class families. And what I'm wondering is how can we, or what needs to happen for us to be able to communicate very precisely what the impacts will be on taxpayers if we ask and our member towns vote to approve borrowing this money. At the moment, it doesn't like we know what that number is. Is there a way, what's that process look like to determine exactly what the impact will be in terms of increases and
Yeah, so we will do those calculations. We will have the data for, $100,000 home, $200,000 home, the median home, so that it should be very clearly spelled out. And it should also be made clear that the more successful the fundraising is, the less borrowing we will do, right? And the more the endowment at Williams, the more successful the endowment is over the next year, the less borrowing we will have to do, right? We're going on having just the 2.5, and the committee could also make a decision to hold less than $1 million in the renewal fund. Right now, we're binding ourselves to that previous decision, which, you know, is fine, but that means that we're limited to 2.5. We will get new numbers next October. So long before we have to do any actual borrowing. We won't borrow more than what we need.
If I could, sorry,
if I can
Julia.
just add to that, I think one of the questions that we've received is, do you have community support? And so this is a way also to demonstrate community support that may in and of itself enable additional fundraising. So I just want to add that component.
That's a really good point, that if we're able to pass this at the town meetings, then we may generate more fundraising. Yep. Yeah, Jose.
Just to follow up on my question, or at least I think I'm feeling uncomfortable at the moment approving this motion without knowing what the potential impacts will be. And I appreciate there's lots of unknowns between now and October, but you know, the motion that sits before us is to ask our member towns for approval to borrow up to $1.8 million. So at least we can, you know, we're not going to borrow any more than that. We might end up, you know, perhaps needing less. But even at that, I wouldn't use worst case scenario, but even in that sort of maximum amount, it would be really helpful to me, and I think certainly to, you know, residents in our member towns to know, you know, what kind of impact this will have on them. I'll end this by asking, you know, is there a reason for us to, well, what harm might there be if we delay, you know, voting on this motion? Like, imagine if we were to retract the motion and vote on it once we have more details at our next full committee meeting. Is there something that we lose in the process by waiting?
Go ahead, Joe.
So this motion, if it's voted in the affirmative, what would happen is a number of us would start to work hard on all of those details and do it fairly publicly. You know, we will need to collaborate with the town's finance committees to really get into the details of tax rate implications accurately. We also will need to start to figure out all of the milestones and details for actually being in the town meetings as a votable item. You know, that there will later be, and Jose, this is where this motion, like it puts things in motion, but there will need to be a later vote by the school committee with the acronym MGL listed about 10 times and an exact amount. And then, you know, only once that is voted will it actually formally go to the select boards of the two towns to try to get into town meeting warrant as an article that's votable. So this isn't, I mean, it's committing a lot of time and energy to the effort, but it's not the vote that will actually put things into the warrants at the two town meetings. So that's one detail that I think it's worth noting, that this is, it's not a paper tiger, but it is not full commitment. It's just, if we do push forward, I think there are a number of us who will probably spend a lot of time over the next 2 months trying to get everything lined up. That's all.
Yeah, Julia.
Not to take us off track, but I also think, and what is our alternative? And I know I feel, you know, I'm not speaking for the funding committee, I'm not speaking for anyone else, but depleting our reserves at this time would be a major problem. And it would actually, I believe, end up resulting in cuts to student programming, in, you know, academic programming. So I say, what's our alternative? This, to me, is a way to gauge community interest and to allow us a space to give a campaign and hope that this works. But I don't actually feel, to your earlier question, Jose, that there's a great plan B.
Thanks, Julia. Steve?
Yeah, just following up on that, in terms of the proposal, I really like this. This is going to the towns. This is making our case. And we haven't done that before. We haven't done that for the administrative multipurpose building. We haven't done it for the first phase of the field project where we did the ADA and we split various things off of it. This is something we knew we were going to have to do from the very beginning when we had the addition renovation of Mount Greylock. This is something we've been planning on for years. We've been able to do most of it, or a good chunk of it, with other resources, and now is the time to go to the towns to finish it off.
Thanks, Steve. Jose, did you have your hand up again, or you're okay?
Oh, no, thanks, Carrie. I was, I'm being pensive here. No, thank you, Carrie. I'm okay.
Christina, do you want to put this to a vote? Do you want me to do it? What do you want to do?
Yeah, so we have a motion made by Julia and seconded
By Steve.
by Steve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Bowen, aye.
Henry, aye.
Constantine, no.
Elfenbein eye.
Green eye.
Malloy, aye.
Miller, aye.
Thank you. That motion passes with 6 ayes and 1 no. Okay. Anything else from the field and track project fundraising group? All right, so we will move on to our next agenda item, the finance subcommittee report.
So finance subcommittee, we are starting to look at, well, not starting to, we are continuing discussions on the budget for FY24. And we're going to come back to you in March with some detail on how we think we can respond to the requests that we've been receiving from the school councils via the principals, as well as from the technology departments that we heard tonight. So we are taking those requests very seriously. We're going to be very transparent about what we can and cannot do. And if we can't meet certain requests, we will try to respond with what we can do to at least meet them partway. All those who have made requests should rest assured that they are being taken into account. We will have also more information, we hope, at that time about the direction of our contract negotiation process. So that's a big budget item for us in FY24. As you know, we're moving into a new contract, and lots of other really great information coming to you soon, because March is a big budget month. So I think I'll just open it up for questions unless Joe or Jake wants to add anything to that. Want to? No. Okay. Great. Yeah, Joe.
So now we have the tuition agreement item.
Yeah, so tuition agreements, we are proposing a new tuition agreement, and we actually voted it to recommend it in the Finance Subcommittee today, so it exists as a motion on the floor of the school committee right now. Ursula, do you want to repeat the motion, or Steve, do you have
I don't
it?
have it in front of me. I'm sorry. Steve, did you write it down? I won't get it word for word.
Yeah, let me
I thought
actually,
Steve typed it.
I'm sure he sent it to us, so.
Oh, let me look.
I sent
real
it to
quick.
you, Joe, because I thought you were presenting it. but
Oh,
if you
gotcha.
wanna-
I was gonna
I
say, I
can
don't think
grab
I
it.
saw it.
I can read it off.
Okay,
Okay,
Perfect. Thank
So it
you.
was a motion to recommend the submitted agreements to the school committee for approval, subject to consultation with district council for language on the town in quotes in point 6.
so this is a new tuition agreement. We've had tuition agreements with the towns of Hancock and New Ashford for a long time. They used to be based on a different kind of formula. We're now proposing, and this has been in consultation with the two towns, that we base it on our per pupil cost. So that is what is different about this tuition agreement. So the section is section 4. In the Hancock, is it section 4 in both? Yep, section 4 in both. You'll see that it's a per pupil rate, less per pupil transportation services, debt retirement and service, and programs with other school districts. And then what has been typical for tuition agreements is that if there are any costs associated with special education, that those are paid directly by the towns. So the only question, and it's one that I raised, was to do with this second to last sentence in number 6, where it says the town shall also be responsible for participation in team meetings. So that seems to me like it should be more specific to the town's delegate for education, or the principal, not the principal, but the special education director, or the town's delegate. So we're just checking the language there. What does it mean by the town? Because IEP meetings are, quite private and not really open to public officials. So I just wanted to ask about that. But other than that, the finance subcommittee approved this for your approval, or recommended it. Are there any questions, or Joe, do you want to add anything to what was said?
No, I think that just for the only thing within these agreements, aside from the fiscal years, that has changed is that bullet number 4, how the per pupil or how the tuition rate is set. In the past, it was set by using a resource that the state used to publish to a website based on our end of year report and October 1st information. The state does not do that anymore. So we needed to collaborate with the two towns representatives to come up with a different way to get at the same thing. And so that's what this is trying to accomplish this year.
So do you want a second to that motion, Carrie?
Yes, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Christina.
Mhm.
Does anyone have any questions about the tuition agreement? So for those who don't know, who might be watching this meeting, the town of New Ashford tuitions students into Lanesboro Elementary School, as well as Mount Greylock for middle and high school, because they have neither an elementary school nor a middle high school. And the town of Hancock tuitions students into Mount Greylock for middle high school. They do have an elementary school. So that's why there's a difference in grade levels in the two agreements. We also use this tuition agreement as the basis for tuition agreements with other communities, in addition to Lanesboro and sorry, not Lanesboro, Hancock and New Ashford. Doesn't look like there are any questions.
So all in favor?
Owen, I.
Conry, aye.
Constantine, I.
Elfenbein, aye.
Green, aye.
Malloy, I.
Miller, I.
Thank you. That motion passes. Anything else from the Finance Subcommittee? Okay. Moving on, I'm getting a little mixed up here.
Yeah.
I think essentially I'm just passing it back to you, Carrie, the MASD division.
Yeah. So this is fun. I went to Washington, not last weekend, but the weekend before for about 4 days. And I went to an equity symposium, an all-day equity symposium, which was great. And then 2 days of advocacy, keynotes and workshops. And then the fourth day was actually meeting with our representatives on the Hill. So there was a Zoom meeting with Markey's office on Monday, but then the next day there were, for me, 5 meetings with different representatives. I can actually tell you who they are because they're still in my calendar. Just have to pull up the right one. Let's see. So Senator Markey was on Monday, and then on Tuesday, Representative Moulton, Trahan, McGovern, Neal, and Lynch. These were all with their staffers. But I did run into Richie Neal in the hallway and had a great conversation with him. And one of our other MASC members ran into AOC in the hallway and had a wonderful moment with of conversation just in the hallways of government, which was really nice. So when we met with the staffers, and that's typical to meet with staffers, we lobbied or advocated for 3 things this year. One is universal free lunch for all children across the country. Massachusetts has been generous with its funding for universal free lunch, but we want to see this happen for all kids. The second is the IDEA funding. So full funding for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. As we're probably familiar, currently the federal government funds about 12% of the promised 40%, right? So that was the promise when the act was passed, was that the government would fund 40%. And right now they're trying to get it up to 15%. It's not clear that increase will even happen given the current government. And it's a problem. It's a problem for all schools across the country that the services for special education are not subsidized by the federal government. They fall almost completely on the districts and the towns. And so advocating for full funding was a priority by the Massachusetts Association of School Committee members. And then the last one doesn't affect us as directly, but the reauthorization of the Carl Perkins Career and Technical Assistance Act. So the Perkins Act, as it's called, is used to fund career and technology pathway programs in non-VOTEC high schools. So if we were to start a pathway program in culinary arts, we could use the Perkins fund to, or the Perkins monies to fund that. It is also used in vocational technical schools starting new programs. So if McCann wanted to start a program that it didn't currently have, it doesn't receive Chapter 74 funding for the first 2 years. It has to establish the program before it can receive state funding. So it can, but it can, McCann could use the Perkins fund in order to support that program while it's being established. So this was the third thing that we lobbied for. There is a Day on the Hill coming up in May, and I'm actually going to be meeting with, thank you, Jake, for connecting me. So Jake connected me to Mary McDonald, who has connected me with student leaders at Mount Greylock. And I'm going to talk to them about participating in the Day on the Hill in May as student leader advocates. So I think that's it.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions for Carrie? All right, so next up on the agenda is the discussion of our school committee summer retreat. Some of you may remember we were supposed to have a winter retreat. I don't think that's going to happen with all of the things that are going on with the budget. So we're looking at summer, and I think likely what's going to happen is Carol will push out a poll looking for availability so we can get that on our calendars now before, you know, everyone goes off to Bora Bora or wherever you're headed for your summer vacations. Jake, I don't know, I'm sure you're going far away, someplace tropical, right? So we'll try to get that out soon, and we apologize that we didn't get the workshop off this winter, but it will happen this summer. All right.
Christina, I'm sorry, could I just put a, well, would it make sense to ask folks just while we're here if there's a time of the summer that works better? Because I would kind of rather do this in August than at the beginning of the summer. And it could even be done in conjunction with our August school committee meeting, right? So we could do the school committee meeting, have lunch, whatever, do the retreat, or vice versa. I mean, if there's just a way to consolidate that way, that might help. And I don't know if people could do it during the week if it were in August, or if it really doesn't matter, given not everybody works a academic year job. So,
well, how about it? Why don't we shout out our preferred month? Julia?
I could do parts of August and certainly in conjunction with the August school committee meeting, but otherwise later in August.
Okay. Ursula?
I don't think it really matters to me.
Okay. Curtis?
Likewise, mid to late August.
Okay. Jose?
I'm going to be the contrarian again. I will make it work if it is August, but certainly early in the summer, June being my preference, followed by July, followed by August.
Okay, if it were somehow connected to the August meeting, maybe that would be more amenable to you.
If potentially, if there was a remote option for the retreat, certainly would be highly amenable.
Maybe if you have to be remote, we can put you like on a cart that moves around so you can actively participate. Maybe we can get a Zoom, like one of those Roombas, and you can move around that way, just randomly.
We can draw a beard on you with
what works for you?
With enough warning, I can hopefully adjust my schedule.
Okay, great. All right. So moving along, we have upcoming meetings. So we have finance subcommittee meetings, February 23rd and March 9th at 4 p.m. There's a policy and governance subcommittee meeting currently scheduled for March 1st at 5 p.m. And our next regular session school committee meeting is March 9th at 6 p.m. And that will still be remote. Yes, Curtis.
Do we need to put on there the Monday policy and governance meeting that we just added? The 6 o'clock meeting, does that need to be made publicly?
Yes, that's this coming Monday.
Yeah, Monday, the 13th, is that right? 12:30, yeah,
Is there a time?
6 p.m.
Thank you. Thanks, Curtis. All right, I have no other items to discuss. Any agenda requests? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to enter into executive session with no intent to return to open session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A. Section 21A1 to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Julia. All in favor?
Owen, I.
Conry, aye.
Constantine, I.
Elfenbein eye.
Green eye.
Malloy, I.
Miller, I.
It is 7:34. If we could pause the recording, and Joe, if you